What's up, everyone? I hope you are doing fantastic today. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, day number 8, 9, 10 of the coronavirus shut-in, at least in the Maryland, D.C. area where I am located. But we're still coming to you with episode 157 of the MMA Ratings Podcast. I'm here with Schwan Humes, and we're going to be talking about the sport of MMA for at least the next 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, even though nothing has happened in the last few weeks, no fights or anything like that. But Schwan, say hello, let everybody know how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Starting to shut down here around Texas. Texas was behind the curve, clearly. The other people are on day 10, day 12, day 15. We're about to be on day one in my area where they're officially shutting down. But everybody's okay, and I'm just staying busy. Got to keep moving, crack the whip on these kids, make them go run with me now. So they
Man,
hate having me home because I'm like, y'all got to go do something.
the entire country is kind of on the behind the curve, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens, man. It's going to be interesting. It's interesting watching the news and watching people make the mental acrobatics or do the mental acrobatics and make their justifications for whatever side they're on to make them work. But we'll figure it out. There's a lot there to really talk about there. So let's jump into some conversations about mixed martial arts. So we got a few different things to talk about, and it's not a whole lot from an action standpoint, but just some status updates and some thoughts about some of the other headlines that are coming around from a news standpoint. And the first of which is, again, we're going back to UFC 249 now. This is a mega event, and it's probably what everyone's been focused on as of late, because we are now 3 weeks out from this Saturday for what would be this is the sixth time they've tried to book Khabib Nurmagomedov versus and Tony Ferguson. All the other times it's fallen apart for whatever reasons it may be. UFC President Dana White is claiming that there is a venue in place and this fight is going to go on. He has not said where that venue is. I'm going to take a stab at that in a second, but the event will be closed door. He has talked about that. We're going to talk about some of his quotes as well today. But this is coming at a time where medical officials are basically asking for more stringent policies around lockdowns across the United States. I mean, major cities, major metro areas, such as the one I'm in, such as where Schwan is, he just said, LA, New York, I mean, all of California, Texas, Florida, some friends of mine in North Carolina as well, are going through major shutdowns. For this area, for example, today, DC just passed a stay-at-home not law, but executive order where all non-essential businesses are going to be closed through April 24th. So that's a month from now before anything will go on. And still, with all that in mind, UFC President Dana White is still saying this event is going to go on. He's basically saying without question that this event will go on. And he's also even going on record today saying that after UFC 249 happens, that the UFC will be right back to their regular schedule. They're going to rebook all the three events that they've missed over these last 3 weeks. They're going to rebook all those fights and they're going to move on like nothing, like everything's all clear, no matter where the rest of the country is. And that's really interesting when you look at it's the exact opposite of what medical officials are really saying about this. So Schwan, I want to dive into this. We got a couple of different talking points. And my first question to you is, do we think this event is still going to happen?
Honestly, I think it is. I mean, it really shouldn't, but I think it is. Especially if they move it to where we think they're moving it. It's a cash grab. It's a money grab, and it's pretty much as we stated last week. If a fight gets canceled this time, you can't ever make that fight again. You can't. It's been canceled too many times. Too many things have happened. This fight doesn't go off now. You can't ever sell that fight again as a headline. As a headline fight. I mean, how are you going to convince anybody it's going to happen? You can't. So you have to find some way to make this fight. Because if you don't, you can't make it at a later point, and it just hurts promotion. It hurts the division, and it hurts the legitimacy of Khabib's title reign because he really hasn't fought a lot of elite guys in his entire time at lightweight. So he needs this fight as much as anybody else.
So we're going to get on to that in a second. I want to talk about whether or not this fight was going to happen. Before, I was saying no, 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 no. But then I asked a legit question. The WWE has been hosting events at their performance center for the last 2 to 3 weeks, I believe, maybe a little bit more than that. They've been having them behind closed doors, and over the last week, we've seen their production value kind of change because they're really like they're hamstrung with no audience there. So they've made some changes to it. This past Monday Night Raw was actually pretty interesting. I've been wondering because nobody's been talking about it, but I wonder if the UFC has reached out to the WWE to ask them about leveraging their venue to host UFC 249. Clearly, there's enough space in there. There's enough space. They have the production capabilities to put on a show that can be broadcast around the world. So I'm interested. No one's really dived into that, and I would not be surprised if that's the case. However, something has changed in the last few days. 2 WWE wrestlers have been quarantined. 2 wrestlers that have been at the Performance Center performing there. They've both been, Rey Mysterio and Dana Brooke, they've both been quarantined. There's no word on if anyone else has been quarantined. There's no word on if they were showing symptoms or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, 2 individuals have been quarantined. So even that location and the steps that the WWE is taking to keep that location safe, in air quotes, has been compromised. So I wonder if that's ever been brought up. I wonder if that's where the location is going to be. But even still, I am interested in seeing where this event will be held.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't put a lot of thought into that, but it would be a legitimate option to use it because they do need an area that's kind of contained and is used to having athletic competitions and set up for everything. But once again, like you said, it's starting to be something you can't even really ignore. And due to the nature of pro wrestling and the nature of fighting in itself, with a virus situation like this, it's just a matter of time before it gets spread, especially with the nature of the sports they're in. I'm not quite sure. I mean, outside of the initial money grab and trying to keep their place in the sports world and maybe move up in the place in the sports world because all the other sports have come to a stop. I just don't understand the sense of this because if someone ends up getting it and taking it home to a family member or something like that and they trace it back, which is possible because that's how they've caught a lot of people, I just don't know how they recover from this because it would just be looked at as egregious and it being put in poor taste, just like you had the other fighters who were injured who can't get medical attention now because they're putting themselves in self-quarantine. It's like there's just so many ways this could go wrong. And if he somehow navigates this without anybody getting something serious or really causing more of a problem, it'll be a miracle. But there's just so many things that if one thing goes wrong, it's just a chain of events that could essentially set the UFC back years and years. Because it's not just people who are complaining, it's other promoters, it's fighters. They won't say anything because they don't want to get on Dana's bad side. But it's fighters, it's management aren't really fine with this. It's fans, it's just a really bad look. And if it goes bad, this could be something that I wouldn't say it would just stink the UFC, but it would definitely set it back quite a few steps.
And you said something that's very important that I also think no one's really talking about is I wonder if a fighter, let's say, okay, I'm going to use Randa Marcos as an example. When she returned from fighting in UFC Brasilia, she was tweeting about having what she thought was symptoms and not being able to get tested. She hasn't said anything since. She's been pretty mum since. Do you think that there's a possibility, and this is just speculation and innuendo here, do you think that there's a possibility if a UFC fighter was to pop up with this, with COVID-19 or the coronavirus, do you think that there's a possibility that they could be forced into being silent about it?
I mean, there's a possibility, but the thing about it is we never know about it because nobody would ever admit to anything until they were out of the UFC, by which time, once again, we wouldn't care. That's what happens. All these things happen. The fighters never speak out because they're in the middle of their career, they're on a run, whatever happens. They're just trying to stay in the UFC. Then after they leave the UFC, then they're like, well, this happened, and I was held out of this, and I was forced to do this. But nobody cares at that point. So even if something came out, I could see someone just shutting up and playing their position, hoping that, once again, it would do them a favor in the future, which we both know it won't. And then later on their way out, well, the UFC made me do this. I really believe that could happen. And to be quite honest, as we said many times before, these fighters, even if that's the case, it's ultimately going to fall back on the fighters because these aren't children, these aren't teenagers, these are in some cases parents, husbands, wives who are regardless of what the UFC is telling them, they are putting their careers and their lives and the lives of others at risk by continuing to compete. That's just the fact of the matter. If LeBron and them were doing this, they'd be catching flack and they'd be called out as adults and role models and people in society. And if this goes badly, some of it's going to hit the UFC, a lot of it, but some of it, once again, is going to fall back on these fighters who are choosing to do this. Job or not, you can refuse to do it. And they're choosing to engage in this. And if they are saying it's because the UFC makes me, the fact is you want to fight for the UFC, you chose to fight for the UFC, you're continuing to fight for the UFC, you're making a decision. So a lot of the blowback's going to land on them too. So it's a really bad situation. And to answer the question, yes, I believe someone could be coerced or talked into keeping their mouth shut, especially if it's somebody who's not in the best standing or not on a win streak. You know, they don't want to risk getting cut and being put back in the open market. They might just stay silent and play their position and not say anything in hopes that it's going to open up doors for them later on down the line with the UFC, which it never does.
Now, you mentioned something about people using their platform and like speaking up about the situation. You used the term role models. I don't know if you saw, but both Conor McGregor and Tyson Fury took to social media today to support the need for social distancing and isolation in light of what's going on around the world. I mean, those are probably two of the biggest stars in combat sports right now, in my opinion, probably one in 1A. Even them two at that high of a point are calling for people to begin to, isolate and stay away from each other to help deal with this matter. Obviously, neither one of those individuals are American and they don't reside in the United States, so they're pleading with their own countrymen. But you haven't seen as much pushback there to those fighters from fans as you see to media members who are talking about the situation that is going on here. Why are we still having fights? Why is it still a conversation? Why isn't the UFC backing down? Why do you think that there's a difference between the two?
Because people, I mean, first of all, let's face it, in mixed martial arts, even in boxing, the athletes, the promoters, other writers, other media members, all they do is slander the media. They're all a bunch of babies. They're all a bunch of whiners. They're trying to take people's money. They're trying to get people suspended. They're complaining about how I do my job. Dana White's complaining about. Everybody complains about the writer. Hell, as a writer, I don't know if you've been complaining about. I know I've written articles and I've had coaches contact the people who run the site I'm writing for. I've had them contact fighters I know and tell them I need to watch what I'm saying. So it's easy for the fans to attack the writers because everybody attacks the writers. The fighters stick fans on us. The promoter six fans on us. The management six fans on us. The only time they're ever interested in the writer's perspective is if it's going to benefit their writer, i.e. an interview, i.e. some good publicity, i.e. something that will allow them to speak their piece. When they need you, they use you. So of course they're going to attack. Of course they're going to attack the media. The media is made out to be the enemy 90% of the time. As Dana said, it's the wimpiest people in the world complaining about what all the alphas are doing. I mean, of course they're going to attack us. And if it was a lesser fighter, Dana might say something to them too. But he's not gonna talk crazy to Conor, not in public. And he has nothing to say to Tyson Fury, not in public. It's just because of the stature those guys have, they get to say what they say and do what they do. If it was a lesser fighter, might not be listened to. And if it's a media member, nobody wants to listen to a media member because they've been made out to be public enemy number one. Even though everybody uses the media for their own benefit, fans included, fighters included, promoters included, financial people included.
Okay. Last question I want to ask in reference to this before we move on to our second topic today. What needs to happen for the UFC to say enough is enough? Like, where is that bar? We originally thought it was for Donald Trump, who is obviously best friends with Dana White, to say, enough is enough. We're not having any matches. We need to shut everything down. We thought that was the case, but we see how that situation is changing. What needs to happen for the UFC to take the same stance that the NBA or NHL, Major League Baseball have taken, where they say, you know what, we're not going to do anything for the next 2 to 3 months?
I don't know. To be quite honest, if you're asking me, I do not know. I would have thought that the things that happen as they have would have been enough, and I've been proven wrong. So if you ask me what it takes, I could not tell you. I have no earthly idea what it takes for there to be a limit where he says enough of this, we need to do something else.
And in my opinion, I think that it would have to come down with a major star contracting it. It would have to be someone like a Valentina Shevchenko, Conor McGregor, a DC, someone in a major position would have to contract it, and it would be even, in my opinion, it would be even more scary if it was someone who hadn't just fought, like because then that the question becomes where did they get it from? Who have they been in contact with since? Let's say Gilbert Burns, he just fought last. Like, what happens if he was to come down with it, and then it would be a massive runoff from there because everybody was in that cage when UFC Brasilia went down. I think it has to be a situation like that before the UFC to say enough is enough. Because even to this day, they're talking about all these events that they're having. They're talking about they're not going to stop and they're not going to slow down. No one's pressed them to ask, or Dana White hasn't put himself in a position to be asked about what type of testing they're doing for not only the fighters, but for the staff and everyone else that's around the organization.
Well, it's not just that, but you have to wonder, the test, as I've understood it, is very expensive. So the fact of the matter is most fighters can't afford it. And most fighters, though they might get covered for insurance while they're fighting, they don't get covered for insurance for random stuff. And since they're independent contractors, most of the fighters can't afford to get the test their own. So if they start feeling bad, all they're going to do is quarantine and then 14, 20 days, whatever days later, come back. They don't have a way to prove that they've had it. And the UFC doesn't test for it. So, there's really no way people can go around and really, outside of something dramatic happening, who's got any proof that shows that they had it and it's directly related to the UFC? It'd be very hard to do that. Conor McGregor can afford
that's
it.
Why I was saying,
can afford it.
That's why I was saying, yeah. That's why I was saying, like, it would be interesting if it was someone like a Gilbert Burns or someone that like just fought recently, and if they came down with it and it was tracked back to that event in Brazil, I think it would be a serious situation.
I agree too, but I'm just like, how would he find out? He can't afford to get the test. The only people I know who can afford to get the test are like politicians and wealthy people and celebrities. I don't think Gilbert Burns falls in that category, even if he wasn't feeling good.
Here's the thing, though. The UFC painted themselves into a corner. They said if anybody is having on their roster or in their employment is having an issue getting a test, they can pick up the phone and call Dana and call the UFC, and they'll get them they'll find a way to get them a test. So the UFC put that out there in writing, and he said it on damn near every show that he's been on in this run-up. So if that's not the case, then that's another part of the conversation that becomes a big problem.
Well, that's true, but if that's the case, how come McDessie and Marcos clearly think something's wrong? Why haven't they got tested then? If the UFC is going to cover it, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
why would they want to know for sure?
Those are all good questions. Those are all good
well,
questions.
Once again, that will fall back to what you said about maybe they keep it quiet, because if you feel like you need to self-quarantine, wouldn't I want to know for sure? Like, wouldn't I want to know for sure even if I have it or if I'm negative? Because if I find out I'm negative, you can't call me for nothing for the rest of the time. I'm negative. I'm in the clear. I somehow avoided this bullet. I'm done. But if I am, then now I've got to re-examine how I handle everything moving forward. I mean, at this rate, the only way somebody would find out if they had it in the UFC is if they got deathly sick, deathly ill, or outright die. Because, like I said, most of those fighters can't afford high doctor bills. They can clearly barely afford to pay their bills because they're always begging for bonuses.
I mean, all of that is very true, and I think it'll be an interesting situation to see how the UFC's what the PR is like coming out of this. I don't think anyone is really going to cover it from a mainstream standpoint, but it is a talking point that I think needs some coverage, and I don't think it'll happen. But it would take something like that for people to turn and be like, hey, what the hell is going on here? Because you see nothing's really like WWE is having events 3 times a week. They just have Monday Night Raw. They're about to have NXT tomorrow night, and they're going to have a SmackDown on Sunday night. No one's batting an eye at that. So it'll be interesting to see if something happens.
Yeah, it'll be. I mean, most likely nothing's going to happen. And be honest, if something happened, that would be crazy, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So, best case scenario, nothing happens because the UFC learning a lesson isn't worth someone losing their life or being seriously ill or having somebody in their family get seriously ill as a result. So, if the UFC just gets to skate by and not having anything negative happen, it's fine by me because that means everybody came out a okay. For something for them to get caught or for pressure to be applied to them, something bad would have to happen, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, much less any fighter.
So let's take this opportunity to move on to our second topic today. I wanted to just go over some news from this past week. We don't have a whole bunch of news, but it's just some interesting pieces I wanted to kind of break down. The first was the, I guess, pseudo match announcement, and I'm saying that in air quotes for those that can't see me, maybe news in air quotes as well, that Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen are supposedly booked for a fight in May. Now, Sterling came back and he said that there's been a bunch of names thrown out there and multiple fighters are in the discussion, but nothing's been put to paper yet, especially with the stuff going on around coronavirus. I know there was talks about him either being booked up against Peter Yan as well. I definitely remember seeing some news about that, but nothing came out. So my first question to you, Schwan, in reference to this is, what are your thoughts, your initial thoughts about a potential bout between Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen? Is this a fight in which we could see a new number one contender coming out of this bout here, or is this a fight where the winner of Peter Yan has to face the winner of this potential fight?
Well, first of all, I know this is not a fight that Sterling wanted. Sterling was trying to get Cejudo. Sterling was trying to get Jan. Sterling was trying to get somebody who has some heat and is ahead of him. Sandhagen isn't the name he wanted. Sandhagen doesn't have a lot of heat behind him. He's been fighting very, very well, but he's not a name. He doesn't draw attention in a negative sort of way. He's just a one of those high risk, low reward type fighters. So I know for a fact Sterling is not going to be happy about this fight, other than having a fight on the table. For Sandhagen, this is great. Sterling started going a little bit of a run. He's flashy. He draws attention. He's kind of got a burgeoning fan base, and he's had some very big wins over big names recently. So for Sandhagen, this is the perfect